Assalamualaikum. Good day and welcome back to the virtual colloquium 2021 organized by Institute of Teacher Education International Languages Campus, or better known as IPGKBA, with the theme Humanizing Teaching and Learning, the Dynamics of Language Education in the Waves of Global Change. I am Nurmazni Abdul Karim, a lecturer here in IPGKBA, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Before we proceed with today's presentation, I will briefly present to you a little housekeeping matters. First, please register yourself in the link provided. An e-certificate will be given out to you based on the email address that you provided. Please ensure that you key in your email address correctly. Secondly, the speaker will present his talk for about 40 minutes. This will be followed by a question and answer session from the audience. If you have questions for our speaker, please feel free to post your questions in the chat box. The speaker will answer the questions at the end of the session. Lastly, we would like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social network. Now, allow me to introduce you to our presenter for today, Professor Richard Keeley. Professor Richard Keeley has great depth of experience in the field of education because he has been involved in the teaching and learning since year 1977 when he first started teaching. In addition, he has undertaken research, published and supervised PhDs in language program evaluation, language testing and assessment, identity in language teaching and learning and teaching, curriculum design and materials development in ELT, and not to forget the EAP curriculum, English for Academic Purpose, yeah, Prof? We are proud to share that, to mention here that Prof. Richard was also involved in IPG's BEd twinning programs many years back. Yeah? We are also delighted to mention that he was also involved in the Teacher Communicative Language Teaching Project for English as a foreign language in secondary school under the Center for British Teachers here in Malaysia. He was in Sekolah Menengah Semerah Batu Pahat. That was long time ago. In 1980, he was there for 4 years, 1980 to 1984. All right, without further ado, please welcome Prof. Richard Keeley, who will be presenting on teacher research for the development of teaching. I present to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Masni and Dr. Kim, Dr. Salva, all the colleagues at IPGKBA who have organized this series of seminars. It is a pleasure and indeed an honor to be invited to participate, particularly this series where the theme is humanizing language teaching. Humanizing is a very important idea, particularly where we become more and more reliant on technology. In my talk today, I'm going to emphasize humanizing. My research over many years has focused on understanding the human interactional elements of the classroom. I'm now going to share the screen, and you should be able to see my PowerPoint. Now, my title today is Teacher Research for the Development of Teaching. And this comes from work I've been doing for the last 10 to 20 years. And I'm going to, in this research, explore what the teaching involves and how research can add to that. Now, in the abstract, which I think you've probably seen, the key words there are direct improvement. So my focus in teacher research, in promoting teacher research, is to contribute to the direct improvement of teaching, the strategies and activities teachers use in the classroom. In this talk, I explore ways in which research is already part of teaching, identify research processes in which teachers are expert, and present a framework, which I call the craft of teaching. Now, the really important idea here, and the idea I have been developing with, is that the expertise of teachers as teachers must not be lessened, diminished, minimized by engagement with research. That the expertise of teachers is an enrichment for research. And it is very important that in doing research, the experience and expertise from teaching is always there. Now, the case for teacher research, I have included here a number of publications, some other people, but largely my own, in the last 10 or 12 years. The first one, research is part of effective teaching, first developed in a publication in 2010 and actually in a recent book. Research into teachers' practice enhances teacher learning and professional development. Research also enhances student engagement and program quality. Research is integral to post-method pedagogy, for example, Kumarabadi-Velu's work, reflective practice, exploratory practice. And research is a route to personal as well as professional development for teachers. So this positive view of research is not new, but what is my focus, my point of emphasis is that research can be developed, research skills can be developed in order to improve teaching, contribute to better teaching. It is not about developing an alternative expertise and taking teachers out of the classroom. Now, so research is part of effective teaching. Research practice enhances teacher quality, student engagement, and program quality. And research engages with knowledge of practice and for practice. This is my book, my 2021 book. The book has 14 chapters, 4 examples of teacher research, and 45 outline teacher research projects. But in this talk, I'm going to focus on a story from the classroom, understanding that story, and then a matrix, which is a way of unpacking the complexity of teaching, a way of understanding how teaching works, and in a humanized way, this story from the classroom is looked at. And then at the end, some questions and discussion. Now, the story. This is a classroom in the UK, a teacher who I worked with for some time. I was an observer in her classroom, taking videos. She also participated in workshops. And this example is not from video. This is a teacher account. It is the teacher telling this story of her classroom earlier that day. So this is a teacher in a workshop at the end of her day of teaching, talking about the experience she had in an open way. Let me read it for you, and then for the rest of this talk, we will look at the points of significance in this story from the teacher. Slightly later on, during the same vocabulary activity, while we were all checking as a class, one of the students wanted to return to a word, which we checked 2 answers before. The word was assessment. The student had a thesaurus on her desk, which she had borrowed from the library, and I had noticed earlier she had copied down the title and ISBN number. I presume because she intended to buy a copy for herself. She was unsure of the meaning of assessment and asked if it meant determination. I had to think for a bit and then replied that no, it didn't in the noun form, but as a verb, yes, it could mean the same. I remembered that the week before we had been reading a survey report, and the model sentence introducing the purpose of the report used the verb assess. The purpose of the survey was to assess the levels of student satisfaction. She wasn't happy with this explanation and called me over to her desk and showed me the entry in the thesaurus, which indeed had determination as a noun under the entry of synonyms for assessment. I then tried to explain that although it was listed as a synonym, use of synonyms all depended on context, and you couldn't just substitute one word for another. What I actually said was that you cannot use the words like for like, using my hands to demonstrate this expression. The student sitting next to this girl, just the week before, had asked what expression he could use in a particular situation. The expression that I offered him was like for like. So as I used the expression in my explanation on the use of synonyms, I turned to him to check he remembered the phrase. He smiled and acknowledged that, yes, he had remembered. Now, what we have here is a story from the classroom, complicated spoken narrative of a teacher remembering some incident in her class. The whole incident in a long lesson was probably a number of seconds, maybe 10 or 15 seconds. But in my view, in my analysis, hugely significant in terms of teacher research and teacher quality, teaching quality. Now, let me set it in context. This data is from the Insight project, and the data is in the form of episodes, CLEs, critical learning episodes. This is how we constructed the data. And the episodes are teacher accounts or videos of lessons. There's also a data set of interviews with teachers and workshop discussions where teachers discuss CLEs, the critical learning episodes. Now, if I can just go back and say, this account was a teacher who was teaching a class of young adults. So they were, it was in the UK. So these are students from different language backgrounds, social backgrounds, who are in the UK, and they are taking this in a college, and it's a life skills course assessed by a language exam. So actually the teachers are teaching a communicative language teaching program focusing on communication and the use of language in the community and in the workplace. But they are teaching to prepare the students for an exam. The exams are quite traditional. They have a grammar element, reading comprehension, listening comprehension, writing. The focus on the writing is vocabulary accuracy, grammatical accuracy. So even though the orientation is communication, actually the language focus is, if you like, quite traditional. The second key feature of the context is the classes were organized in an unusual way, normally 6 hours per week, but in two lessons. So 2 3-hour lessons. And this was very interesting to research, to work on with the teachers, because a 3-hour lesson, a 3-hour English lesson, is quite a demanding structure. But the teachers were skilled. This is what they were accustomed to. Now, in the project, we had teachers' accounts, the videos, interviews, workshop discussions, and they were constructed by researchers, including myself. Now, the data analysis was episode segmenting from accounts and videos. So together, mainly with the researchers, but together with the teachers, we identified episodes. We then constructed from the interview and workshop data, what did they say about those? And that analysis was done by the teachers. The workshops were continuing professional development workshops, but they were also research data analysis. And the analysis was guided by the emergent components of the craft of language teaching. And what we identified in this project was the craft of language teaching, which has 5 components, drivers of the teacher's work. Now, we conceive of these components as drivers. You can see here we have a single 5-sided figure to represent them. But the 5 components are ACA, analytic cognitive activity, LA, learning awareness, SAC, social, affective, and cultural factors, CC, classroom continuity, and component 5, curriculum, policy, context. Now, when we had a lot of discussion to arrive at the best labels for these components, and we had drivers, but we also had the idea that these are what the teachers always have in their mind. They are always thinking, working out, analyzing. They are developing their learning awareness, using their learning awareness. Component 3, social, affective, and cultural factors. That is the core of the humanizing element. Component 4, classroom continuity. Teachers are driven by, in one lesson, by what happened in the last lesson and what is going to happen in the next lesson. This classroom continuity, it's not about teaching one lesson, it's about a series of lessons. And the curriculum policy context, this is what the teacher is required to do in terms of materials and exams. Now, having explained those, I put them in this kind of pentagon, this 5-sided figure, and we can see our official descriptions of these. So we have ACA, LA, learning awareness, individual language learning trajectories, SAC, the social, affective, and cultural factors, classroom continuity, and CPC, curriculum, policy, context. Now, I'm going to go through and explain in a bit more detail how we came to these components, how we decided on these 5, and then how we use them in analysis. And finally, I'm going to talk about their significance in understanding the contribution research can make to teaching, to teacher development. Now, analytic cognitive activity, this is in the words of a teacher in the workshop talking about their teaching. The choreography involved in orchestrating the timing, interaction, decision making, etc., that goes on during a lesson, like a theatrical or dance performance. It's like analyzing the interplay between directors and players. So, this is 2 points about this. Number one, it is the teacher as organizer. And number two, the hard work, the mental effort required to be the organizer and to keep everyone on theme, on activity. Another one about planning, where the teacher said, most thought about my lessons probably occurs in class as the lesson unfolds. I may spend very little time planning beforehand or reflecting afterwards, but while I am teaching, I will be constantly questioning the best way to proceed in order to create the best learning opportunities for the group, be this in consideration of social or pedagogical factors or both. So what we have here is quite a contrast to the message of initial training, where we tell teachers, you plan. You go into the classroom with a detailed plan, and then you implement the plan. That's a good way of starting. But actually, later on, as teachers become more expert, the planning is in the classroom. Now, if we can look at this in the context of our story, and we look at the analytic cognitive activity of our teacher, she said, I had noticed earlier, I presume, and then I had to think, then I remembered, then I tried to explain. Just the week before had asked, this is remembering. I turned to him to check, he remembered. So you can see all these verbs and this activity, this analytic cognitive activity, as the teacher explains what she did. We can see the weight of the cognitive analytic side in this story. Now, the second component is learning awareness. And here we have a teacher probably this teacher talking about this student. She likes using the dictionary, and I try to wean her off that because I want her to engage with other people. Now, this is particularly interesting for me because what we see here is individualization in the class. This is one student of 17, but the teacher has a particular objective for that student because the student likes using the dictionary. Normally a good thing, but actually she doesn't talk to other people. So the teacher has an individual learning program for that one student. And that is part of the component learning awareness. And another perspective is a teacher who said, I don't really use a lesson plan. I have an idea of what I want to do. Then you bring the stuff out of them. And by the end, I want to know they're going to use it. So again, the lesson, the plan, the implementation of the plan, the teaching is actually in the learning awareness. How are they coping with this? How are they getting on? Another example of this is in the classroom when the teacher is doing board work, say on a new grammar point. And as a teacher, you have to decide in the classroom there and then, have I explained this well enough for them to understand so they can do the exercise in the book? Or do I need to look at it again? Do I need to go through this board work again? And in a split second, every teacher must make that decision. And they make it by looking at the faces of the students, by making a judgment. How are they doing? How are they coping with this? If we look at this learning awareness in this episode, highlighted in green here, we can see the student, we can see the learning awareness of this student. One of the students wanted to return to a word, okay? And then it didn't in the noun form, but as a verb, yes, it could mean the same. This is a very complex linguistic analysis the teacher has done in real time, but it shows learning awareness in that her student here was a student quite keen on grammar, quite keen on formal description, formal linguistic description. And then the teacher used those to explain to her. Okay. And then we find listed as a synonym, the use of synonyms all depended on context, and you couldn't just substitute one word for another. This is a particular message for this student on synonyms based on the learning awareness the teacher had. And finally, the little bit at the end where the second student becomes involved. And I turned to him as I was speaking to check he remembered the phrase. So that's learning awareness. Social, affective, cultural. This is the core of the humanized classroom. And one teacher said, in my opinion, good teaching depends on the culmination of many things. Vitally, respect for learners. Personality must surely play a part, but it's more important than this. But more important than this is the internal philosophical and moral fiber of the teacher. I do not believe that caring and empathy can be taught. What we have here is a focus on mutuality and the belief in the classroom that the teacher is doing her best for the students, and then the students do their best for the teacher and for themselves. And the social affective cultural component is this reminder, this platform for mutuality in the classroom. We can see that in many areas of the episode we're looking at, the like-for-like episode. One of the students wanted to return to a word. Now, behind this, the questions we can ask, how did the teacher know that? And then, what kind of classroom atmosphere was there where the student was comfortable asking the teacher? The student was understanding. This teacher is approachable. This teacher, I can interrupt this teacher. I can go back after two further questions and ask the teacher, and the teacher will help me, not be cross with me, not be rude or whatever. We can see that in the second section of it there. She wasn't happy with this explanation and called me over to her desk. Now, you kind of think, who's the boss in this classroom? Who's leading? And this is where we have mutuality. The teacher is controller. The teacher is organizer of the classroom. But actually, the teacher is also a service provider. The service being provided by the teacher is a kind of individual lesson. And the students can pull in attention and call the teacher over to the desk and tell the teacher or communicate to the teacher they're not happy with an explanation. And finally, we have an exchange of smiles with another student. And of course, we know from pragmatics and other discourse studies, smiles are very important in communication. The classroom continuity is the fourth component of craft. And we have lots of talk in the interviews and particularly in the workshops, where teachers provided a justification for what they did in terms of what had happened in previous lessons. The first one there, it was related to what that student said to me in the past. And another teacher talking about a lesson, also, we had been talking about money as a topic. So this is the phenomenon where teachers are the memory. The job of the teacher is to be the memory for the class. And in this, particularly in the area of vocabulary, it's a platform for recycling, where the teacher recycles, the teacher reminds students. And we know in good vocabulary teaching, this is very important, that you encounter the same words, but in different contexts, maybe just slightly different contexts. And this is akin to natural vocabulary learning in social settings. If we look at, this is another example, an example recently, she came in with attitude, she sat in the corner, she put on her earphones, I asked her, I talked to her, I went through the paper with her. This week she came in on time smiling and she said, I'm sorry. So this is a teacher telling a story, a different account to the story that I had earlier, not like for like, but actually a teacher dealing with a different student. And it wasn't dealing with the difficulty in one lesson, in one go. It was actually over time, over a series of lessons, the teacher persisted with changing the thinking of a student, and then the student came round. Now, we can see here in purple 2 points in this narrative where the teacher says, I remember that the week before, and then the students sitting next to the girl just the week before. So what we have here is an acknowledgement, if you like, that the lesson is not a lesson in isolation, and that the way to deal with a student is professional, technical in terms of how teachers must behave in the classroom, but also localized, individualized to the history of that student in the class. So this individualization is really important in effective teaching, in keeping students engaged over a long time. The final one, curriculum policy context. And here, teachers were critical of the way they were required to teach. One teacher in interview said, under the pretext of improving the quality, targets have been put in place. We have a standardized literacy curriculum, a Pavlovian political agenda with little bearing on people's motives for learning. So this is a teacher very critical of the way they are supposed to teach programs. This was a period about 12 years ago in the UK when there was the introduction of a lot of bureaucracy for teachers. There was an online component introduced in the curriculum, and teachers were required to complete a lot of forms, tick a lot of boxes on screen with little purpose, little understanding of how these were going to be, used. But then another teacher said in interview, I like the rigor offered by essay writing, revision, and exams. So in terms of curriculum policy context, you had teachers who were critical of what they were required to do by the government, the institution, the program, their program leaders, but they were also traditional, if you like, in terms of the rigor offered by essay writing, revision, and exams. Now, we can see this here in how traditional, how examination oriented the teacher is. I've highlighted in yellow here 2 points. The noun form, but not as a verb. So this kind of linguistic curriculum with parts of speech used in conversation, this was actually how the teacher did things and prepared the students for what was in large part a grammar-oriented examination. And then she spoke about the purpose of the survey was to assess the levels of student satisfaction. This was part of the new bureaucracy at that time that was being introduced in this institution. Now, these are 5 components of the craft of teaching. And over the duration of this project, I identified 5 topic areas where we could use these 5 components to understand teaching better and to organize CPD. The first one is teacher expertise, and we find all these drivers in teacher expertise. Classroom practices, as I've illustrated, in classroom practices, we can see all 5 components. In student transformation, and student transformation is a way of looking at learning, where students are changed. They not only become better language users, it's not just language learning, but they also become more effective, more efficient students. It's the 5 components are found in resources, the materials teachers use, and then communities of practice. We can understand them for teacher development, continuing professional development. What we get with the putting together the components of the craft of teaching, the ACA, LA, SSC, CC, CPC, and these topics, and we get these 25 cells, 25 areas, and these are relevant areas for teacher research. If I can focus on one here, and this is at the intersection of classroom continuity and student transformation. Research into the relationship between teacher revision and recycling talk in the classroom and student learning and understanding what is important. So this is the difficult area we don't know very much about. One of the areas we don't know very much about, and one of the areas where teacher research can make a contribution. This is the area here in the classroom continuity, student transformation cell, and a sample project that I developed in my book. How do I sustain student engagement over the course of a term, a semester, or a year? And from this question, which is a question of teaching efficacy for the teacher, we have research objectives, data, what kind of data am I going to use, data analysis, how am I going to analyze that, and then what further development? What will I do as a teacher with this new understanding? So my conclusion then, teacher research is an integral part of teaching, particularly teacher research in the sense making, the explaining sense. Research has the purpose of explaining why what happens in the way it does. Teacher research promotes teacher learning and professional development. Research is a form of teacher research. Research in the form of teacher research plays a transformative role in language teaching. So what I'm promoting, what I'm asking for, what I'm suggesting to you as teachers and teacher trainers, that research is directly transformative of language teaching. That researching your practice as a teacher contributes to how you practice as a teacher. And in that way, without any contribution to wider theory, sharing in journals or other public domains, that actually research makes a difference. Teacher research to show strengths, raise awareness, and to share, but not necessarily to publish. Teacher research to transform practice, not to leave practice. And teacher research to be the best teacher you can be, not the best researcher. And with those thoughts, I end this presentation. There are some references here. And now I would like to say thank you, hand back to Dr. Nur Masni, and take any comments, questions, observations you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much. Thank you for the insightful presentation. Very informative indeed, yeah. Especially with regards to teacher research, as you mentioned, for the direct improvement of teaching and learning. And I like the fact that you mentioned teacher research is to show strengths, raise awareness, to share, but not necessarily to publish. It is more of how we try to improve our the teaching that we carry out in the class to make sure that our students learn at the end of the day. The aim is for the students to learn and to make sure that it happens in a very conducive environment, and our students are comfortable, yeah, all the time.
Yes.
And with a smile, as you mentioned just now. All right. Okay. Prof, we'll try to take on some questions. Yeah?
Yes,
Hold
very
on.
happy to.
Yeah. This one here. Why is this teacher talk? Hold on. Why is this teacher talk very important to sustain students' transformation? Anything that
Yes,
you can share?
I hope I have communicated this idea that teacher talk is tremendously important. I suppose the third component, social, affective, and cultural. But what we found in our research is that teacher talk is the teacher, a bit like me, talking about what is to be learned, sharing with a wide group. So when the teacher talks to the whole classroom, when the teacher explains, when the teacher instructs, when the teacher organizes, orders students to do something. But actually within that, we have a lot of individual conversations accompanied by glances, looking at the student, accompanied by what is remembered, individual questions. When I started as a teacher, and very early in my career, when I was teaching in Sekolah Menengah Semara in Batu Pahat, um, actually there were no discipline problems. The students were very good students. But to manage the classroom, I learned as a young teacher, I should learn their names. I should know the name of the student so that I can nominate. And this was actually a way, partly of controlling, but it was also a way of individualizing. So I could ask a question. And the teacher talk is enormously complex. But what I would recommend as an area for teacher research is analysis of teacher talk to understand how a lesson for a whole class is also a series of individual lessons for those students. And the second point I would say about that, when we analyze the discourse of the classroom, what we find is students are collaborators in this individualization project. Students, they learn very quickly how approachable this teacher is. Can I call this teacher over to my desk to check my particular problem? Or is that not possible with this teacher? And approachable teachers make themselves available to individual students like that. Now, what we have in our understanding, we have two bodies of knowledge. One, we have the kind of routines for lesson planning for trainee teachers. And when we're talking to trainee teachers, we give them the message that you plan very carefully, and then you go into the classroom and you implement the plan. And that is correct. That is a good point for starting. That is how they become teachers at the start of their career. But then the second thing is they have to learn to do this individualization. They have to learn to deal with what each student is saying, how each student is engaging. And what good teachers become very good at is encouraging, promoting that engagement by students. When I was first involved in research many years ago, the focus on questions was a very live issue, questions in the classroom. And actually, the phenomenon was questions are the domain of the teacher. The teacher is the one who asks all the questions. And classrooms typically have very few student questions where the teacher provides the answer to the student's question. And there was an idea that good classrooms are classrooms where students ask a lot of questions. But what we didn't have was this follow-up activity to understand how do good teachers who have a lot of student engagement, how do they achieve that? And what does it look like? And that's what teacher research can provide in terms of a better understanding of teacher talk.
Yes, Prof, well said. And you mentioned about localizing, you mentioned about individualized teaching, you know, how all these are important to make sure that our students stay engaged. And
Yes.
it's not just for primary school learners, secondary school learners, and what we have here, the student teachers to be. As you mentioned just now, yes, we train them to how to plan lessons and so on, and how they deliver. But the most important part is when they are delivering, what are the things that they go through. and how they make sure that students are engaged in the lesson that they are carrying out. Yeah, Prof, very clear indeed. And thank you. There's another question here from Nuruddin Ola Lekan, I think from Oranbon. He's asking, kindly explain more on your statement that teachers should be a best teacher and not a best researcher. Teachers should be the best teacher and not the best researcher.
Well, thank you very much for that question. I was conscious I was going very quickly over that point. A lot of my work in the last 20-something, 30 years has been in the university sector on programs for teachers, typically MA programs, and I have taught on many MA programs, designed many MA programs, and of course supervised many PhDs. Now, in a PhD, the teacher who takes a PhD is becoming a rigorous researcher, and it is research making a contribution to knowledge more widely. But at Masters, teachers do a Masters, and the Masters program is organized as a program of professional development for teachers. And what this means is the expectation is through master study, the teacher becomes a better teacher. How do we make that happen? Well, in the past, there has been a focus on research, and there has been a focus on research in terms of doing a dissertation and the rigorous research procedures involved in that. And to me, that can be an unintended mistake in focus. The teacher is the expert at teaching, but teaching is seen as not really relevant to this focus on research. When you have the focus on research, the teacher is a novice. The teacher is a beginner. The teacher is without great skills. And therefore, the effort in doing a master's program, the effort in completing a master's dissertation is about becoming the best researcher. And in the focus there, it separates from becoming the best teacher. And in a lot of occasions of master study, you have a focus on research, which is separate from the expertise in teaching. You have a focus on research, which leaves the teacher feeling not very positive about their professional self. They feel they are trying to become the best researcher, but not actually succeeding. This is typically the case where they are part-time student and full-time teacher. And it is very difficult to find the time to do all the tasks involved in research. I think in master study for teachers, we need to remember that the expertise of teaching is the basis for achieving the goal of professional development. The expertise of teaching is something which you build on. You recognize the teacher has this expertise and then try to use that to understand the classroom better through the medium of research.
Yeah. And more for development, right?
A stronger element on development as a teacher. Yes. And then the development of research is contributing to that as well, but not on a different plane completely.
Yes. All right. Okay. Thank you for that great explanation, Prof. There's another one here from Nalisa. What can you say about the publish or perish mentality of most academic institutions? I think this mentality forces the teachers to do research as not to lose their jobs. What is
Yeah.
your take on this?
Well, I do think this is a change in the last few decades. It is particularly it's a phenomenon of the university sector and the college sector and what used to be teacher training colleges with a professional focus. Now they
Mm-mm.
are higher education institutions, and then you have this
Publications.
culture of publish or perish. I think we have to understand pendulum swings where it goes from a focus on practice without research to a focus on research where practice gets left behind. And when
Mm.
you have these pendulum swings, the extremes are never the best. We must find a happy medium. But the publish or perish, we have to ask what is the contribution of the published research? And a lot of published research is actually read by a handful of people, very, very few people. And the impact it has on practice is a discourse claim rather
Mm.
than a reality. If I can just give a slightly different perspective on this, when we did our research in the Insight project, 12 years ago we started that, but we had a strand of understanding how teachers read research and how teachers benefit practically from the research that they read in academic programs or outside. And you know what? We had hardly any data. Teacher said, no, I don't read. If I
Mm.
read, I just look at the recommendations for practice. I never read the research bit.
The
So
whole thing,
actually,
yeah.
yeah, so there is a lack of connection. And the more that is published, the less impact it has. And the risk is it leaves the profession feeling that research is irrelevant to the development of practice. And for me, that is not an acceptable position. We must recognize the contribution research can make, but it is a contribution to practice. And teacher research, even in the
Yes.
university sector, perhaps especially in the university sector and in the higher education sector, research can make an enormous contribution to practice.
Yeah, especially the fact that it must always contribute to the development, the improvement, and it can be in pedagogy, in the policy making, and things like that, right? Even if
Yes.
we are looking into theories, maybe, so there must be some kind of improvement, right? Okay, thank
Well,
you.
yes.
Yeah, you like to add?
No, no, no. I was just going to agree with you.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Prof. Prof, I think there's one last one here from Teresa Lashmi. She's asking here, you also mentioned about recycling talk. Could you please elaborate more about this talk here, and how to apply it in classroom? Recycling talk.
Yes. Um, this is something, when we started talking about this, the teachers were not so aware of what they were doing. But it is such a natural thing that the teacher is like the official memory of the lesson, of the class. And teachers were reminding students, do you remember what we did? What was the word we had when we had the reading comprehension about New York? And sometimes teachers scold the students and say, are you paying attention? Does nobody remember? Only me. And, and what this is doing is connecting new bits of information, new bits of language with previous bits. and reminding the students what we did, what words we had, sometimes the operation of grammar rules, some general principles about spelling. Teachers, through experience, they learn their own techniques for helping students, reminding students. And this recycling talk, this classroom continuity component, is really important in the expertise of teachers and in their effectiveness in their teaching. So it's something I think that when you raise awareness of it, you get teachers responding, oh, yes, I do that. Sometimes I express my frustration that the students seem to not remember what we did even yesterday. But the frustration, of course, is fine too. That has its part. And scolding is part of classroom talk that has a function. But when you raise awareness of this component of teaching, teachers think, oh, yes, I do that. What is the effect of it? How much of it do I do? How does it go, develop over days, over weeks, connected to materials and phenomena like that? Yes.
Yeah, very true indeed, Prof. We will only realize this once we get ourselves recorded talking in the classroom. We get to see ourselves repeating most of the time, sometimes,
Yes.
and sometimes, when we are being firm with the students, even, the ways that we tell students on what to do and what things not to do and things like that, right? Okay, Prof, thank you so much. Thank you so much for enlightening us with the topic, teacher research for the development of teaching. And thank you, just now you shared the story from the classroom and how you connected that to the learning episodes. That was interesting. I'm sure we are clear, the audience and I, we are clear now that, as you mentioned just now, you started off with research is part of effective teaching, something that we have to remember. Yeah. And research practice enhances teaching and learning. And also it enhances student engagement and program quality, whichever program that we are carrying out at that time. Oh yeah. And Prof, you also used, I like the Pentagon diagram that you showed, the 5 components in terms of the drivers of the teacher's work. It was well clarified, and the way and the research areas that you mentioned. There's so many, as to how to make sure our students stay engaged. You mentioned just now. That sounds simple, but that is a research area. How to make sure that our students stay engaged, right? Okay. And you also mentioned that research engages with knowledge of and for practice. Yeah. And I hope all of you, the audience, have gained some insights on the topic and enjoyed the presentation by Prof. Richard here. Thank you, Prof, again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, dear all, for being with us today. The KOMAD committee would like to thank the Educational Technology Division, Ministry of Education, for the platform, the studio director, Encik Azhar Ali, the producer, Dr. Suras Kanagasabai, and IPG KBA's technical support. Yeah. With that, this brings us to the end of the session for today. Thank you again, Prof. Richard. Thank you again. Our next session will be on the 26th of October 2021 at 11 a.m. Do join us for this session. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day. Stay safe and take care. Take care, Prof. Thank you so much.
Bye.